So today I'm going to show you the fastest way you can get started with Scribbletune and React in the browser, entirely in the browser. So we are going to use something called stackblitz. So this is a pretty cool little web app that lets you build front-end applications right inside the browser. So you don't need Node.js, you don't need terminal, you don't need anything. You just need your browser and that's about it. So we're going to create something that looks like this. It's a very simple app, as you can see, just like showing the selected scale name, and you can cycle through these scales, cycle through the root nodes, and as you can see, it also outputs the notes of that particular scale. So for example, if I'm in the key of E major pentatonic, then it will also show the notes of that E pentatonic. It also has this start button over here that lets you kind of play that selected scale like this and then stop it. So this is the kind of tool that we're going to build with Scribbletune and React. And we're going to use stackblitz. So stackblitz is a pretty nice little thing to kind of get started with prototyping some front-end applications. So since we're building a React-based project, we're going to use this template over here, this React JavaScript template. And here we have this little project put together. It's using VS Code in the browser. So you can use your familiar shortcuts and whatnot. It has this app.js, it has this index.js, which imports that app.js. It has a style sheet as well, so that you can, style your app or whatever. For making any web browser based Scribbletune apps, we have a dependency called tone.js, and I'm going to use the CDN.js version of tone.js. So I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to create a head section, because what I want is, as soon as the page loads, I want tone.js to be available to the application before I start using it. So I'm going to use a script tag and set the source to the CDN.js version of tone.js. So that's all you need to get started in terms of what dependencies you need for the web app other than Scribbletune. And since we mentioned Scribbletune, let's also add Scribbletune to the project. So I'm going to add Scribbletune like this. It's installing the dependencies. Installation completed. It also has this package.json where it kind of updates whatever dependencies you installed. Okay, so all good. So let's get back to our app.js right here. We'll start by placing the UI elements. So we need a select box. Two of them actually, one for the root nodes and one for the scales, and one button we need. So yeah, so these three elements are our UI elements. So how about hard coding the options just to get the UI going? And similarly for the roots. So this is pretty much our UI. We are going to use this section to populate the currently selected scale, and this section to populate the currently selected name of the scale. So something like this. And in this section, we would have something like C4, D4. These are the notes of the pentatonic scale, and so on. So this is our UI basically, and we have it all going right now. So now we need to just make sure that we are injecting a bunch of scales over here instead of just this one scale, and all the correct root nodes in this drop down. And we need to make this a bit dynamic as well, this and this. So let's start by bringing in something from Scribbletune called scale. Import scale. We'll also import something called scales, plural. So the scale method gives us the notes of a particular scale, and the scales method gives us a list of all the scales available in Scribbletune. And you can always refer to the documentation on scribbletune.com for what those scales are. Behind the scenes, I'm using Tonal to get hold of all these scales, and the music theory part that Scribbletune uses is from Tonal, and here are all the scales that we get out of it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to populate the actual scales that we want to show in this select dropdown. And for that, we're going to use a method called getScaleOptions. And we're going to use the scales method from Scribbletune. It is a method that returns an array. we're going to map over that array and return the option element like this for each array, like this. So instead of major pentatonic, we are going to substitute that with the scale itself. So here I'm exporting S as the variable for each scale and then using it to populate over here. So if I use this instead of this within curly braces, and it's a method. Okay, get scale options is not found, is not a function. All right. Yeah, that's the reason. Yeah, that should do it. And now we have all the scales that we want to use in this application. And similarly, what we're going to do is we are going to augment the, and similarly, we are going to use another method to get the root nodes. And we'll call it get root options. And instead of the scales, we'll use the rest of the method as is. We'll start with a string that looks like this, and then split that string to make it an array. We'll split on the comma. So now we have an array that we are splitting, and the rest of the thing is just mapping over that array and setting the option string. And we'll use this method instead of this hard-coded option C. There we have it. Now we have a bunch of scales and a bunch of root nodes and the start button. So obviously the start button needs to be a bit more dynamic. We can now start introducing state, like the client state. And obviously we're going to use useState. We'll start with a variable called isPlaying. So this variable is responsible for maintaining the state of the application if it is playing a scale or if it is not. And the default value will be false. And we'll use this isPlaying variable to define how we want to show this, how we want to show the label for this button. So if it is playing, then we want to show start. If it is not, then we want to show stop. And obviously we'll need one event handler over here to manage that, like this, on click, and we'll call this maybe just toggle play. And what this toggle play will do is we'll define it over here. We can close this guy. At the very least, toggle play is going to call set is playing and set its value to whatever is the value of this, but to the opposite of that. So we'll just put a bang over here and then is playing. And now toggle play is kind of attached to this on click, with this on click to this button. So hopefully we can see the behavior, at least at the UI level. We can see that the start and stop is working as expected. We'll add some more additional state so that we can update this as well as this. So let's start with a couple of variables more, just like is playing, to note, to kind of store the state of the currently selected root node, which is C at the moment, but let's kind of define it like this. And at the same time, we'll also have something that does the scale. So at the moment, this is major pentatonic. And I'll name this as mode, because mode also means scale. And the reason I'm doing this is because I already have a scale variable at the context of this application. I have the scale variable, so I don't want to call this scale again. So I'm calling it mode. Mode just means scale, just another word. And here we will use our scales method and use the first item from that scales method, which happens to be major pentatonic. So it kind of aligns with a UI. So now we have this root and this mode, and let's use them in our UI. Firstly, I'm going to use a template literal instead of this. And instead of C, we will have the variable root. We leave the octave at 4 itself, because we could have made this dynamic as well, but for the sake of this video, we can leave the octave at 4. And of course, we can change the major pentatonic to use, so instead of hard coding major pentatonic, we'll just use mode. And the same thing we'll do over here as well. Same for the root. There. So we have C major pentatonic and the scale itself drawn out based on this root and this mode. One other thing that we will quickly add is on the change of these elements, we will also update the UI for these elements. So let's quickly add that. And since it's an on change event, we'll define 2 on change events for, let's call this maybe on root change. And we'll define that on root change quickly. It takes the incoming event, uses its target, and sets the root like this, e.target.value. Similarly, we'll have one for on scale change. On scale change. Or maybe we can call it on mode change because we called it mode. And in here we'll use like this. Yeah, and let's attach it to the on change of this dropdown. On mode change and on route change. So let's see what happens on that. So yeah, when you change this dropdown, it updates the UI. Let's check if it happens for the scales as well. So let's say I go for minor pentatonic. Yeah, it updates the view, the label for the name of the scale, as well as it also updates the notes itself. So yeah, so we have got this basic UI going. All we need to now enable is the start stop button in a way such that it plays out these notes, because that's the requirement of our application at the moment. Yeah. So before I go on, I want to bring in tone.js at this point. So as you remember, we added tone.js to the script tag to the head section of this index.html. I want to bring that in because now we're going to start playing the scale itself. So we're going to use the web audio API and we need tone.js for that. So we'll define a method, we'll define a variable over here called the clip, which we will augment over the course of this application. So typically this clip, when you create a full-fledged application, you may have a bunch of clips playing and you may want to use Scribbletune's session capabilities to do that. But since we're keeping things really simple, I'm defining this clip, which is supposed to come from somewhere else. Like, whenever you initialize this application, you would have an initial state coming from somewhere. And this would be part of that initial state ideally. But since we don't have all of that going for this very simple app, I'm just defining this let the clip over here. And why am I calling it the clip? Again, it's something similar to the scale versus mode thing. I already have this clip variable within the context of this application. And I didn't want it to clash, so the clip. And I'll cover that in a bit. But before that, I want to bring in something else, which also would have happened externally from the place that kind of initializes this app. Quite honestly, we could have even put it inside this index.js. But I wanted to keep all of the code related to the application in a single file so that you can review it later or take a look at it and use it as a reference without having to click around on a bunch of files. What we'll do is we'll start by bringing in tone. And what we're doing over here is we're just starting the audio context, the web audio context. So since tone 13 onwards, version 13 onwards, this method of starting tone has kind of changed. It gives you this tone.context.resume method, which is a promise. And on the resolution of that promise, we want to run this method called tone.transport.start. So initially it was only this tone.transport.start that you required to run. But now you need to start it like this. And there are a bunch of ways how you can do it. How do you want to manage this tone.transport? What I'm planning to do is, this is on my mind, this start stop button, instead of starting and stopping this entire transport, which is also a use case for a different kind of application where a bunch of clips were playing. What I'm going to do is on the start or stop of this button, I'm just going to start and stop this particular clip. Okay, and there are many ways to do this. This is not the only way. I'm just going for this particular way for the sake of this video. So now, with that much knowledge, we can now get on with the actual playing of the audio. At the moment, it doesn't play anything. So let's get going with that. So for that, I want to kind of update this method toggle play to be a little bit more explicit. So if is playing, do something, which is basically stop playing. else start playing. So these methods start playing and stop playing don't exist at the moment, but I'm going to define them in a bit. Okay, and hence we can get rid of this, but before that I want to just quickly make sure that I have defined these methods. And then I'll just move this one at the moment over here and over here. So there is some existing functionality carried forward. So if we call stop playing, I want to set the is playing variable to false, and if it is start playing, then I want to set it to true. So just by doing this, we should have the existing behavior carried forward. Now let's add the audio capabilities itself. So another thing I want to do is within these on route change and on mode change is I want to stop any audio if it is playing at the moment. So if is playing, I want to stop playing whatever that's playing. And this applies even for the mode change. So in both the cases, I want to stop playing any audio that's playing. To stop playing, we are going to set is playing to false, and additionally, we are also going to do the clip.stop. Similarly, we are going to do the clip.start for is playing. Now the only thing that's missing over here is the clip itself, the value for the clip itself. So what we want to do is, before we can do start on the clip, we want to set the value of the clip. And how can we do that? We can just assign a value to it like this, and we'll use the clip method here. This is from Scribbletune, the one that we imported over here like this. So we're going to do the clip is equal to clip, and clip accepts a single argument, and that argument is an object literal. In here you can specify the properties of that clip. So in this case, I want to use an instrument which is a synth. This synth is from tone.js, and then I want to use a pattern. This pattern is just a single X at this point, basically, which is a quarter note. So this is a quarter note, and it will just keep on playing over and over again, because the clip method on Scribbletune inside a browser will return a sequence, a tone.js sequence, and it will loop forever. So this pattern, which is just a single X over here, which is a quarter note, and you can obviously define multiple kinds of patterns, like you can introduce rests like this with a hyphen, or you can subdivide a pattern, etc. But for now, we'll just leave it as simple as possible. And here in the Scribbletune documentation, you can take a look at what those patterns imply, what each of the characters in the pattern notation stands for. Okay, so the pattern over here is going to be a quarter note. And the other thing that I need over here is the notes itself that we want to play. And what are those notes going to be? In our case, it is just going to be the scale that is currently selected for the root node that we have. So root plus, we decided we'll stick to the octave, fourth octave, and in here we'll do the mode. So let's just give it a whirl. Yeah, so as you can see, it played the C major pentatonic scale. And if we change the value of the scale, let's say we went for a Mixolydian pentatonic. So not only does it change the view, it also changes the scale that plays. Hope that made sense. And now if you change the root note, let's say E minor pentatonic, yeah. So that's about it. That's our application. And you can create such applications right in the browser with stackblitz. And then if you're ready for taking this application to live or whatever, you can make use of this package.json and these files directly and deploy them somewhere. Hope this gave you an introduction to how you can use Scribbletune within the browser with React as opposed to using it just from the terminal. Please do take a look at the Scribbletune documentation for the browser clip for more information on what all you can do within the clip method. There is the session method as well as the channel method. So yeah, just take a look at all of this, see if you like it, and please subscribe to my video if you like this kind of stuff. I'm going to be creating some more videos hopefully soon. Thank you, and have fun making music.